My name is Cassidy, and I'm 28 years old. Right now, I'm standing in my parents' living room, holding a stack of printed text messages that prove my sister Mallory didn't just steal my fiancé 3 weeks before my wedding. She orchestrated an entire scheme to drain my bank account. My parents are staring at me like I'm the problem, not the victim. My father just said Derek clearly loves Mallory more, and my mother keeps insisting Mallory's too sensitive for this kind of stress. But what they don't know is that I had already discovered something far worse than a stolen fiancé. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family, hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. Subscribe because this story gets wild, and you won't believe how deep this betrayal goes. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I learned early that love in our family wasn't divided equally. It was reserved almost entirely for Mallory. My sister, 3 years younger than me, became the center of our parents' universe the moment she was born. I was 5 years old when I first noticed that Mallory's cries brought both parents running, while mine were met with sighs and closed doors. By the time I was 10 and she was 7, the inequality had become a structured system that governed every aspect of our lives. Mallory attended Riverside Academy, a prestigious private elementary school that cost $15,000 per year. I attended the public school 3 blocks from our house. When I asked why Mallory got to go to the fancy school with the marble lobby and the indoor pool, my mother Patricia looked at me with that patient expression she reserved for my questions and said Mallory needed more attention, more nurturing, more specialized education. I was doing fine in public school, she reasoned. So why waste the money? The logic seemed sound until I realized it applied to everything else too. Mallory took piano lessons every Tuesday, ballet on Thursdays, and horseback riding on Saturdays. Her schedule was packed with enrichment activities that cost hundreds of dollars monthly. When I asked if I could try ballet, my father Harold sat me down and explained they couldn't afford it for both of us, and since Mallory had already started, it made sense to let her continue. I nodded like I understood, but what I really understood was that I wasn't worth the investment. The pattern revealed itself in painful clarity during my spelling bee triumph. I was 10 years old, competing in the regional competition after winning at my school. I studied for months, memorizing word lists during lunch breaks and staying up past bedtime with flashcards. The day of the competition, I spelled every word correctly, advancing through round after round until I stood alone on stage, the champion. I remember the applause, the trophy heavy in my small hands, the photographer from the local newspaper asking me to smile. The coordinator told me families usually took their winners out for celebration dinners. I couldn't wait to show my parents, but when I called home from the school office, my mother answered with distraction in her voice. Mallory had a dance recital that same evening across town, and they were already in the car heading there. Could I catch a ride home with someone else? My teacher, Mrs. Patterson, saw my face crumble and offered to drive me home herself. She even stopped at McDonald's and bought me a Happy Meal, telling me I should be proud. That Happy Meal was my celebration dinner. My parents came home at 10 p.m., talking excitedly about Mallory's performance. They glanced at my trophy on the kitchen table and my mother said, "That's nice, honey," before launching into a detailed description of Mallory's costume. School became my refuge and my torment. I earned straight, as in every subject, driven by some desperate hope that academic excellence would finally make me visible. Each report card was perfect, each teacher's comment glowing. I brought them home like offerings at an altar. My parents would glance at my grades and nod approvingly before turning their attention to Mallory's report card, which typically showed C's and a few B's. Instead of concern or disappointment, they praised her effort. My father would ruffle her hair and say she was trying her best, and that's what mattered. My mother would suggest ice cream to celebrate Mallory's hard work. I sat at those ice cream parlor tables, my perfect report card forgotten in my backpack, watching them fawn over mediocrity while my achievements dissolved into background noise. Birthdays crystallized the disparity into something undeniable. When Mallory turned 16, my parents threw her a catered party at the country club. 200 guests attended, including half her high school class. There was a DJ, a photographer, a dessert table with a 5-tier cake. At the end of the night, my father presented her with keys to a brand new silver Honda Civic, wrapped in an enormous red bow in the parking lot. Mallory squealed and jumped and cried happy tears while everyone applauded. 3 months later, I turned 16. My celebration was dinner at Olive Garden with just our immediate family. My gift was a used bicycle my father found at a garage sale, which he was quite proud of because he'd negotiated the price down to $40. I smiled and said, "Thank you," because I'd learned by then that expressing disappointment only made me seem ungrateful. That night, lying in bed, I made a decision. I would stop expecting anything from them. I would stop hoping to be seen. I would become so self-sufficient that I'd never need their approval again. I didn't realize then that this decision would save my life years later. College applications arrived during my senior year, and with them came the final confirmation of where I stood. Mallory was already attending Whitmore College, a small private liberal arts school with tuition costs of $60,000 per year. My parents drove her there with a car full of new furniture, new clothes, new everything. When my turn came, my father sat me down at the kitchen table with a serious expression. Money was tight, he explained. Whitmore was expensive, and with Mallory already there, they simply couldn't afford to send me to a university. Had I considered community college? I could live at home, save money, maybe transfer later. I had already been accepted to 3 state universities with partial scholarships, but the remaining costs were still substantial. I looked at my father's face, at the apologetic expression that didn't quite reach his eyes, and I understood. This wasn't about money. This was about priority. I enrolled in community college and got 3 jobs. I waited tables at a diner, worked the front desk at the campus library, and tutored high school students in the evenings. I slept 5 hours a night and studied in the gaps between shifts. 2 years later, I had enough saved to transfer to the state university, and my grades were high enough that I earned a full academic scholarship. I graduated with honors, debt-free, exhausted, and completely alone. My family didn't attend my graduation ceremony. Mallory had a crisis that same weekend. Something about a breakup or a friend drama. I never got the full story. What I got was a text from my mother saying they needed to stay home to support Mallory through her difficult time. I walked across that stage, accepted my diploma, and sat in my apartment afterwards staring at the degree, wondering why achievement felt so hollow. But the academic betrayal wasn't the worst. That came when I was 22, at a family Christmas party. I'd been dating Tyler for 8 months, my first serious relationship. He was kind, stable, worked in accounting. I brought him home for the holidays, nervous and hopeful. Mallory was living at home again after flunking out of Whitmore following 2 years of partying. My parents had immediately re-enrolled her at another expensive private college, willing to give her endless chances. From the moment Tyler walked through the door, Mallory attached herself to him. She laughed too loud at his jokes, touched his arm constantly, found reasons to sit next to him. My mother thought it was adorable, calling it cute sibling bonding. I felt sick watching it but told myself I was being paranoid. On Christmas Eve, I went to the kitchen to get drinks. When I returned, I found Mallory and Tyler kissing under the mistletoe my mother had hung in the hallway. Tyler jumped back, looking guilty. Mallory smiled at me with something cold in her eyes, and said he came on to her. She was just being polite, didn't want to embarrass him at a family party. My parents believed her immediately. My father pulled me aside and suggested I think about why my boyfriend was looking elsewhere. Maybe I wasn't keeping him interested enough. Tyler and I broke up that night. My family blamed me. This would not be the last time this pattern repeated itself. I just didn't know yet how much worse it could get. I moved to Boston 3 months after the Tyler incident, taking a job as a marketing assistant at a mid-sized firm. The salary was modest, the work demanding, but it was mine. I cut contact with my family to bare minimum. Birthday texts, obligatory holiday phone calls, nothing more. I threw myself into building a life they couldn't touch or ruin. I worked 80-hour weeks, volunteering for every project, learning every skill, making myself indispensable. My colleagues went home at 6. I stayed until midnight. They took vacations. I worked through weekends. It wasn't healthy, and my therapist, whom I started seeing at 23, frequently pointed this out. But work gave me something my family never had: recognition based on merit. When I succeeded, people noticed. When I achieved, I was celebrated. Within 2 years, I was promoted to account manager. 3 years after that, I became senior director. By 26, I was earning a six-figure salary and managing a team of 12 people. My apartment was small but mine. My savings account grew steadily. I built a life brick by brick, with no help from anyone. Meanwhile, Mallory's life remained a revolving door of false starts and parental bailouts. Shed graduated from her second college, barely, with a degree in communications she never used. She worked at a boutique for 3 months before getting fired for chronic lateness. She tried being a yoga instructor but quit after 3 weeks because waking up early was too hard. She announced she was finding herself, which apparently required living in a luxury apartment in downtown Hartford that my parents subsidized, driving a car they made payments on, and shopping with credit cards they paid off monthly. My father justified it by saying Mallory was sensitive, she needed time to figure out her path. Not everyone was career-driven like me. The implication was clear. My ambition was somehow cold, unfeminine, while Mallory's aimlessness was endearing and worthy of infinite support. I stopped asking questions. I stopped caring what they thought. Or I tried to convince myself I had. Then I met Derek at an industry conference in New York City. I was 27, attending a seminar on digital marketing strategies. He sat next to me during a panel discussion and made a joke about the speaker's overuse of buzzwords. I laughed, genuinely, for the first time in months. We got coffee after the panel, then dinner that night. Derek was 31, an architect with his own small firm. He was handsome in an understated way, with dark hair that fell slightly too long and eyes that crinkled when he smiled. But more than his appearance, I was drawn to his steadiness. He called when he said he would. He showed up on time. He asked about my day and actually listened to the answers. Our courtship lasted 6 months before we made things official, and during that time, he learned about my family. I told him everything over wine in his apartment one rainy evening, expecting judgment or pity. Instead, he held my hand and said his family wasn't perfect either, that he understood what it meant to feel invisible in your own home. His empathy felt like a salve on wounds I didn't know were still open. After 1 year of dating, Derek proposed at our favorite Italian restaurant in Boston's North End. He didn't make a big scene. He waited until dessert arrived, then reached across the table, took my hand, and said he wanted to spend his life with me because I was the strongest, most genuine person he'd ever met. The ring was simple, a single diamond on a white gold band, exactly what I would have chosen. I said yes through tears, feeling for the first time that maybe I was worthy of being chosen first. Maybe I could have something Mallory hadn't ruined. Maybe this time would be different. I was so desperately wrong. I waited 3 weeks before telling my family about the engagement, dreading their reaction but knowing I had to. The announcement happened at Sunday dinner at my parents' house. A tradition I'd been avoiding, but Derek encouraged me to maintain. Family is important, he said. Even difficult family. I should have trusted my instincts. We arrived at 6 p.m. to find Mallory already there, sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up when we entered. Dinner was tense as always, my mother fussing over Mallory's lack of appetite while ignoring my attempts at conversation. Over dessert, I placed my hand on the table, letting the ring catch the light. "I'm engaged," I said quietly. My father glanced at the ring and offered a distracted congratulations. My mother said, "That's wonderful, honey," then immediately turned to Mallory to ask about some friend drama. But Mallory's attention had sharpened. She sat up straighter, staring at my hand with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "When can I see the ring up close?" she asked in that sweet voice she used when she wanted something. I should have said no. I should have recognized the calculation in her eyes, but I was trying to be generous, trying to include her, trying one more time to have a normal sister relationship. I slipped the ring off and handed it to her. She examined it carefully, turning it in the light, then smiled at me. "I'm so happy for you," she said. "I want to help you plan everything. Let me be part of this. I want my big sister to have the perfect wedding day." That was the moment everything started to unravel, though I didn't see it yet. Mallory inserted herself into every aspect of wedding planning with an enthusiasm that seemed supportive at first. She wanted to come dress shopping, help choose the venue, pick flowers, taste cakes. My mother encouraged it, saying how sweet it was that the sisters were bonding. I ignored the voice in my head whispering warnings. I wanted to believe she'd changed, that she was finally being kind. The warning signs accumulated slowly. Derek started having emergency work calls during our wedding planning sessions, disappearing for hours at a time. He became distracted during conversations, checking his phone constantly. When I asked if everything was okay, he assured me work was just stressful. A big project had fallen behind schedule. I believed him because I wanted to. I dismissed my gut feelings as wedding stress, as paranoia from my childhood trauma. My therapist asked if I'd considered that my family dynamics might repeat in other relationships. I told her Derek was different. He loved me, had chosen me. 3 weeks before our wedding date, I returned early from a business trip to Chicago. My flight had been canceled, and I'd managed to catch an earlier one. I arrived home at 2 a.m., exhausted and eager to sleep in my own bed. Derek's car was parked outside my apartment building. I felt a flutter of happiness, thinking he'd come to surprise me, maybe fallen asleep waiting. I climbed the stairs to my third-floor apartment, key ready. The door was unlocked. I stepped inside, calling Derek's name softly so I wouldn't startle him. The living room was empty. I heard sounds from the bedroom, and my stomach dropped with a knowing that came before conscious thought. I pushed open my bedroom door and saw them. Derek and Mallory, in my bed, tangled in my sheets. Mallory's head turned toward me, and I saw it. Not shame, not guilt, a smile, a cold, triumphant smile. Derek scrambled up, pulling on his pants, stammering excuses. Mallory sat up slowly, deliberately, her expression shifting to fake tears. "This isn't what it looks like," Derek said, the most cliché sentence in existence. Mallory's voice came out small and calculated. "He came on to me, Cassidy. I tried to stop him, but he said he wanted someone fun, not a workaholic robot. He said you make him feel inadequate with your success." I stood there, keys still in my hand, looking at the two people who'd just destroyed my life in my own home. I told them both to get out. My voice was calm, eerily calm. They left, Derek grabbing his shoes, Mallory taking her time, casting one more look over her shoulder that told me this had been planned, savored, enjoyed. I locked the door behind them, walked to my bedroom, stripped the sheets off the bed, and threw them in the trash. Then I sat on my bare mattress and waited for the pain to hit. It didn't come. Not yet. What came instead was clarity, cold and sharp. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was tight with irritation. "Mallory called us crying," she said. "She told us what happened with Derek, how he came on to her, how you're blaming her instead of him. Don't be dramatic, Cassidy. These things happen. Derek and Mallory are in love, and you need to accept it gracefully." That's when the pain hit. Not from Derek's betrayal, from the realization that my own mother was, once again, defending the person who'd hurt me. I hung up without responding, and I started planning. The first thing I did after ending the call with my mother was open my laptop. I functioned on autopilot, my hands moving while my mind stayed carefully blank. Feeling anything would make me collapse, so I simply didn't feel. I logged into the shared cloud account Derek and I had set up for wedding planning documents. The password still worked. Inside, among the spreadsheets of guest lists and vendor contacts, I found a folder I'd never seen before, labeled simply M. My cursor hovered over it for a moment before I clicked. Inside were hundreds of text message screenshots, organized by date. The earliest was from 2 months after our engagement. Derek to Mallory. She suspects nothing. Told me about her savings account today, has over 80,000 in there. Mallory to Derek. Perfect. Remember, we need to wait until after the wedding. Once she adds you to her accounts, we can start moving money slowly. She's so desperate to have a real family, she'll do anything to make this marriage work. I scrolled through months of messages, each one revealing another layer of their plan. They discussed my work schedule, using my late nights at the office as opportunities to meet. They laughed about my attempts at wedding planning, calling me controlling and obsessive. Mallory sent Derek updates after each dress shopping trip or venue visit, mocking my choices, my excitement, my hope. But the messages that made my stomach turn weren't about the affair. They were about money. Derek had gambling debts totaling $80,000. The messages revealed his addiction clearly, references to casinos and sports betting. Complaints about collectors calling, had hidden it completely during our relationship, or had been too trusting to see the signs. Mallory had her own financial crisis. $50,000 in credit card debt, from years of unchecked spending that my parents had finally refused to pay off. They'd both looked at me and seen a solution. Derek's plan was methodical. After marriage, he would convince me to add him to my bank accounts for easier household expense management. It was normal for married couples, he'd say. I'd agree because I trusted him. Then, gradually, they'd transfer money out. Small amounts at first, nothing I'd notice immediately. By the time I realized what was happening, they'd have drained everything. Then Derek would leave me for Mallory, and they'd disappear to start fresh somewhere else, funded by my decade of 80-hour work weeks and careful savings. One message from Mallory made me physically ill. She's so desperate to be loved, she'll never see it coming. All those years being the overlooked kid made her the perfect target. Thanks, Mom and Dad. They'd weaponized my trauma. They'd studied my wounds and calculated exactly how to exploit them. I kept digging, following threads and connections. I checked our shared credit card statements. The one we'd opened specifically for wedding expenses. Derek had used it for cash advances totaling $15,000, all withdrawn at casinos in Connecticut and Rhode Island. It already paid $30,000 in non-refundable deposits for the venue, catering, photographer, and band. That money was gone, spent on a wedding that would never happen, funding Derek's addiction while he planned to rob me. The nausea became rage, cold and clarifying. I downloaded everything, backed up files to 3 separate locations, then started investigating my family's involvement. This couldn't be just Derek and Mallory. My parents' reaction had been too quick, too automatic. I found the connection in my email, an old message thread I'd nearly forgotten. 6 months ago, my mother had asked about my income, claiming she needed information for some insurance paperwork. I'd given her rough numbers, thinking nothing of it. Then I remembered something else. My best friend from college, Amber, worked as a teller at my bank. We'd had lunch 3 months ago, and she'd asked detailed questions about my savings, my investment accounts, my financial planning. At the time, I'd been flattered by her interest, thinking she wanted advice. Now, I logged into Facebook and searched Amber's profile. There, in recent friend additions, was Mallory. They'd connected 4 months ago. I felt the betrayal layer upon layer, each relationship I'd trusted revealing itself as compromised. I hired a private investigator the next morning, a woman named Rita Chen who came highly recommended by a colleague who'd used her services during a messy divorce. I gave her everything I'd found, plus names and details, and told her I needed to know the full extent of the conspiracy. Rita was in her 50s, efficient and direct. She told me she'd seen cases like this before, family members coordinating to exploit successful relatives. It happened more often than people wanted to believe. She'd have preliminary findings in 72 hours. While I waited, I did my own research. I called my parents' bank under the guise of verifying information for a loan I was supposedly co-signing. The representative, following protocol, asked me to verify existing account details. I couldn't, of course, because I wasn't actually on their accounts, but her questions told me what I needed to know. My parents had taken out a second mortgage on their house within the last year. They were drowning in debt despite my father's stable income and my monthly contributions. Where had the money gone? To Mallory, obviously. Funding her lifestyle, her apartment, her endless stream of failed ventures and expensive tastes. Rita called me on day 3 with her report. My parents had been discussing my finances with Mallory and Derek for over a year. Shed obtained emails through legal means, public records, searches, and interviews with peripheral people in their social circles. One email from my father to Derek's business partner revealed everything. Looking forward to working with Derek after the wedding. I've explained the situation with Cassidy's assets, and I'm confident we can structure a beneficial arrangement for everyone. Cassidy has always been practical about family helping family. The beneficial arrangement was a loan I would never have agreed to. Money they planned to extract after Derek gained access to my accounts. My parents had their own debts to pay, their own dreams of maintaining their lifestyle. I was, as it always been, a resource to exploit rather than a daughter to love. Rita also uncovered that Amber had been feeding information to Mallory for 6 months, paid in cash for her services. Shed provided my schedule, my vulnerabilities, even details about my therapy sessions that I'd shared with her in confidence, thinking she was my friend. Every single person I'd trusted had betrayed me, each for their own financial gain or personal entertainment. I sat in my apartment with Rita's report spread across my coffee table, pages and pages of documented evidence of calculated cruelty, and I made a decision. If they wanted to treat me as something to exploit, I would show them exactly what losing that resource looked like. They'd taught me to be self-sufficient, to need nothing from anyone. Now I'd teach them what it cost to lose someone who asked for nothing but gave everything. I called a family meeting, my voice steady and cold when I phoned my mother. Sunday dinner at their house, I said. I need to discuss the wedding situation. My mother agreed quickly, probably expecting me to apologize, to beg for help salvaging things with Derek, to play my usual role as the desperate, grateful daughter. I arrived at exactly 6 p.m. with a leather portfolio containing printed copies of everything. Text messages, bank statements, emails, Rita's investigative report, all organized with tabs and highlighted sections. My parents sat on their worn leather couch, my father's face already set in that expression of impatient tolerance he reserved for my grievances. Mallory lounged in the armchair by the window, scrolling through her phone with studied disinterest. I stood rather than sat, placing the portfolio on the coffee table between us with a solid thump that made my mother flinch. I've discovered some interesting information, I said, flipping open the portfolio to the first tab. These are text messages between Derek and Mallory, dating back 8 months. They detail an affair, but more importantly, they outline a plan to access and drain my bank accounts after the wedding. My father barely glanced at the pages. "You're being paranoid," he said with a dismissive wave. "You're hurt, and looking for someone to blame besides yourself." I turned to the next tab. These are Derek's gambling debts, $80,000 to various casinos and bookies. This section shows Mallory's credit card statements, $50,000 in debt. This email is from you, Dad, to Derek's business partner, discussing how to structure a loan using my assets after the wedding. A loan I never agreed to. My mother's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. "We were trying to help," she said in that martyred tone Shed perfected. "Derek came to us with concerns about your workaholic tendencies. We thought if we could guide him on handling finances, it would help your marriage." Mallory was just being supportive during a difficult time. I laughed, a sharp sound that startled all of them. "Supportive," I repeated. I turned to another section, pulling out screenshots of messages where Mallory mocked me, called me desperate, discussed exploiting my childhood trauma. My sister sat forward, and I watched her shift into performance mode. Tears welled in her eyes instantly, her voice taking on that breathy, wounded quality. "I love Derek," she said, letting her voice crack. "I can't help how I feel. You've always had everything, Cassidy. Your career, your money, your perfect life. Can't you let me have this one thing? You'll find someone else. You're not getting any younger. but you're still pretty enough." My father nodded along as if Shed made a reasonable point. "Be reasonable, Cassidy. Marriage isn't for everyone. Maybe you're too focused on work to really commit to a relationship anyway." My mother reached over to pat Mallory's hand. "This stress isn't good for Mallory's anxiety. You know how sensitive she is. Can't you just be happy for her and move on?" I stood there looking at the three of them, my family, and something inside me that had been cracking for years finally shattered completely. I saw them clearly for the first time without the fog of desperate hope obscuring my vision. They were never going to choose me. They were never going to protect me. They were never going to love me the way I needed. My father would always see me as a resource. My mother would always prioritize Mallory's feelings over my pain. Mallory would always take and take and take, because they'd taught her she was entitled to everything I had. The grief was enormous, but also freeing. You can't lose something you never truly had. I closed the portfolio carefully and picked it up. "I see exactly who you all are now," I said quietly. That's all I needed to confirm. I walked out of that house, got in my car, drove back to Boston, and didn't look back. For 72 hours straight, I barely slept. I sat at my kitchen table with legal pads and my laptop, planning my next moves with the kind of focus I usually reserved for work campaigns. I called my lawyer, Ellen Hartwick, who had used for contract reviews. I explained the situation with clinical detachment, and Ellen listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, before saying I had grounds for multiple legal actions and that Shed helped me with all of it. I called my accountant next, then the private investigator again. If my family wanted to treat me as a resource to exploit, I would show them what losing access to that resource looked like. My first strike was financial, surgical, and immediate. For 3 years, since graduating college, I'd been sending my parents $1,000 monthly to help with bills. They'd told me they were struggling, that my father's business had slowed down, that they needed help making ends meet. I'd believed them out of some sad hope that contributing financially would make them value me. I logged into my bank's bill pay system and deleted the recurring payment. Done. Then I called the Ridgemont Country Club, where my parents had been members for 15 years. It'd been covering their membership fees for the past 2 years, $12,000 annually, believing their story about temporary financial difficulties. The membership coordinator, Stephanie, knew my voice. I explained I needed to remove my payment authorization immediately due to family circumstances. She processed it within minutes, professional and discreet. I then contacted Mallory's apartment complex, the Sterling Towers, where she lived in a 2-bedroom luxury unit. When Shed moved in 2 years ago, the landlord had required a guarantor because Mallory had no credit history and no steady income. My parents had listed me as emergency financial contact without asking, forging my signature. I'd discovered this months later, when the complex called about a late payment. I'd been furious, but my mother had cried and begged, saying Mallory would be homeless otherwise. It allowed it to continue, making myself responsible for my sister's housing. I called the property manager and formally removed myself as guarantor, stating in clear terms I would not be responsible for any future payments or damages. Within 1 week, the consequences cascaded. My parents' country club dues bounced. They received a letter informing them their membership would be suspended if payment wasn't received within 10 days. Mallory got an eviction warning, 30 days to provide a new guarantor or vacate. My father called 12 times. My mother left crying voicemails. I blocked their numbers after listening to the first 3 messages, each one demanding I fix what I'd broken, accusing me of cruelty, insisting family doesn't abandon family. The irony was apparently lost on them. My second strike was social and professional, more strategic. Derek's architecture firm, Caldwell and Associates, had been courting my company for a major contract. We were planning a headquarters expansion, and the project was worth approximately $3 million. Derek had positioned himself as the lead architect, using our relationship to gain inside access to the bidding process. Had dinner with my boss, toured our current facilities, submitted preliminary designs. I'd facilitated everything, proud to help his career, never suspecting his motives. I requested a meeting with our VP of Operations, Marcus Brennan, who oversaw vendor selection. I explained, professionally and without excessive emotion, that I had a personal conflict of interest with Caldwell and Associates due to my recent breakup with one of their architects. I suggested it might be prudent to consider other firms to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Marcus appreciated my transparency and agreed immediately. The contract went to a competing firm. Derek's boss was furious. Derek had promised he had an inside track, had convinced the partners to invest significant time and resources into the proposal. When it fell through, Derek's reputation within his firm tanked. I heard through industry connections that he was on thin ice, one more failure away from termination. Then I addressed Mallory's social media presence, which Shed carefully cultivated over years. She had 40,000 followers on Instagram, positioning herself as a lifestyle influencer. She posted photos of her luxury apartment, her designer clothes, her brunch spots, all funded by our parents and my unknowing subsidization. Shed recently gained sponsored content deals with several small brands, earning maybe $15,000 annually, her only income. Id had access to her accounts for years, passwords Shed shared casually, never changed. I didn't hack or post anything from her accounts. Instead, I drafted a brief statement on my own social media, which I rarely used but had connections to many people in our shared social circle. I wrote, "After careful consideration, I've decided to cancel my upcoming wedding due to infidelity discovered between my fiancé and my sister. I'm sharing this to explain my absence from social events and to be transparent with friends who've supported me. I'm focusing on healing and moving forward. Simple, factual, no excessive drama, but enough." Within hours, the post had been shared and discussed. Mutual friends reached out with support. Mallory's followers, many of whom were local and knew both of us, started connecting dots. Comments appeared on her recent posts questioning her character. 3 of her sponsors contacted her asking for clarification before renewing contracts. When she couldn't provide a satisfactory explanation, they dropped her. Just like that, her influencer income evaporated. I felt no satisfaction, just cold determination. This was only the beginning. My parents' retaliation came swiftly once they realized I was serious. My father showed up at my office on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 days after Id cut off financial support. He bypassed the reception desk, claiming to be my father and insisting it was an emergency. By the time security reached me, he was already in the lobby, his voice raised and echoing off the marble floors. He demanded I come down and talk to him like an adult, instead of hiding behind lawyers and phone blocks. I descended the stairs slowly, aware of colleagues watching from the mezzanine level. My father looked worse than I'd ever seen him, his face flushed, his shirt wrinkled. "You're really going to do this?" he said loudly enough that people turned to stare. "You're going to destroy your family over a man? Derek wasn't worth it, and you know it. Come home, fix this, and stop being vindictive." I kept my voice level and professional. "I'm at work, Dad. This isn't appropriate. Please leave, or I'll have security escort you out." His expression turned ugly then, a rage I'd seen directed at business partners or service workers but never at me. "You ungrateful bitch," he hissed, stepping closer. "We raised you, put a roof over your head, and this is how you repay us? By cutting us off and trying to humiliate us?" I gestured to security, and 2 guards approached immediately. My father left, but not before shouting that I'd regret this. That family was everything, and I was making a terrible mistake. I filed for a restraining order that afternoon. Ellen assured me we had grounds, and it was approved within 48 hours. My father was legally barred from coming within 500 feet of me or my workplace. My mother tried a different approach, more insidious. She called my boss directly, bypassing me entirely. She told Mr. Brennan that I was having a mental breakdown, that I was unstable and making irrational decisions due to emotional distress from my broken engagement. She suggested the company should be aware that I might not be fit to handle my responsibilities, that I needed intervention and possibly medical leave. She was trying to undermine my career, the one thing I'd built completely independently. Fortunately, Marcus Brennan was not easily manipulated. He called me into his office, looking concerned, and relayed the conversation. He asked directly if I was struggling and needed support. I appreciated his directness and responded honestly. I explained that I'd recently ended a relationship due to infidelity, that my family had sided with the other parties involved, and that I was taking legal and financial steps to protect myself. I acknowledged it was a difficult time but assured him my work performance would remain unaffected. Marcus studied me for a long moment, then nodded. He said he'd known me for 5 years, watched me handle high-pressure situations with grace, and had full confidence in my abilities. If my mother called again, he'd refer her to HR and potentially pursue harassment charges. The attempt had backfired completely. Rather than undermining my professional standing, my mother had given me an opportunity to brief my employer on my situation, ensuring they'd be skeptical of any future interference. Mallory launched her own manipulation campaign through social media and mutual acquaintances. She posted a tearful video on Instagram, her face expertly lit to show her distress while still looking beautiful. In it, she spoke directly to the camera, her voice trembling. "My sister is trying to ruin my life because I fell in love," she said, wiping away tears. "I never meant to hurt anyone. But you can't control who you love." Derek and I connected on a deep level, and yes, the timing was unfortunate, but love doesn't follow rules. Now Cassidy is using her money and connections to destroy everything I have, my home, my career, my reputation. She's trying to turn everyone against me because she can't handle rejection. I'm scared of what she might do next. The video was calculated to generate sympathy, and it worked with strangers who didn't know the full story. She gained 3,000 new followers in 2 days, people sending supportive messages and donations. Mallory created a GoFundMe titled Rebuilding After Family Betrayal, claiming she needed help with living expenses after I'd cruelly cut off support. The page raised $8,000 before I reported it to GoFundMe for fraudulent representation. They investigated, found she'd misrepresented facts, and shut it down, refunding donors. But Mallory wasn't finished. She contacted people in my professional network, spreading carefully constructed lies. She called the HR director at my company, claiming I had a history of embezzling from family members and might pose a risk to company finances. She emailed clients I worked with, suggesting I was mentally unstable and they should consider requesting different account management. She posted in local Facebook groups where she knew I had connections, painting herself as a victim of my abuse and manipulation. Most of these attempts failed. People who knew me professionally saw through the inconsistencies immediately. My reputation was built on years of solid work and ethical behavior. Mallory's word, backed by nothing but dramatic claims, held no weight. Several colleagues forwarded me her messages with notes of support and concern about her harassment. Each failed attempt was documented and sent to my lawyer for the growing file. Derek, meanwhile, took the coward's route, alternating between pathetic apologies and threats. His text messages, which I didn't block because Ellen wanted evidence, came in waves. At first, he sent apologies. "I made a terrible mistake. I was seduced. Mallory manipulated me. I never stopped loving you. Please give me another chance." When those didn't work, he tried blame shifting. "You were always working, never had time for me. I felt neglected, and Mallory paid attention to me." Then came the threats. "You're ruining my career over nothing. We didn't even sleep together that many times. You're overreacting and being vindictive. If you don't back off and stop interfering with my professional life, I'll make sure everyone knows what a cold, heartless person you really are. I'll destroy your reputation, tell everyone you were abusive and controlling." I forwarded every message to Ellen, who compiled them into a formal complaint with the State Professional Licensing Board for Architects. Derek's threats constituted professional misconduct. An ethics investigation was opened. His firm, already unhappy with his performance, distanced themselves further. Derek's position went from unstable to untenable. The coordinated attacks from all three of them created a strange kind of clarity. I'd spent my life wondering what I'd done wrong to make them treat me poorly. Now, watching them scramble and attack when I simply stopped allowing abuse, I understood. I hadn't done anything wrong. They were the problem, not me. Their actions when faced with boundaries proved everything I'd tried to deny. The extended family rallied around my parents and Mallory, of course. Aunts and uncles who I barely knew suddenly had strong opinions about my behavior. My father's brother called me selfish and heartless. My mother's sister posted on Facebook about the importance of forgiveness and family loyalty, clearly directed at me. Cousins blocked me on social media. My grandmother, my mother's mother, left a voicemail calling me vicious and vindictive, saying I should be ashamed. The family group chat, which I was still technically part of, filled with messages about my cruelty. I read them all with detachment before leaving the group. They'd made their choice. I was uninvited from my cousin Emma's upcoming wedding, the invitation rescinded via a cold email citing family drama. Every bridge was burning, and I let them burn. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to maintain relationships with people who'd never truly cared about me. The freedom was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. The constant attacks took their toll despite my determination to remain unaffected. 6 weeks into the conflict, I stepped on my scale and saw I'd lost 12 pounds without trying. Food had become something I forgot about, rather than something I enjoyed. Sleep was elusive, my mind replaying conversations and planning defensive strategies until 3 or 4 in the morning. I'd wake exhausted, drag myself to work, maintain my professional facade through meetings and emails, then collapse at home. Panic attacks started without warning, my chest tightening in the middle of grocery shopping or during conference calls. I'd excuse myself, find a bathroom, and focus on breathing until the sensation passed. My therapist increased our sessions to twice weekly and gently suggested that while my actions were justified, the stress was becoming dangerous to my health. Was winning worth destroying myself in the process? I didn't have an answer. One particularly bad night, I sat in my apartment at 3 in the morning, crying in a way I hadn't allowed myself to cry since childhood. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and painful, the kind that leaves you empty afterward. I questioned everything. Was I wrong to cut them off? Was I a terrible person for not forgiving my sister? Was I being vindictive rather than protective? The doubts my family had planted were working their way through my mind like poison. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was cold and heartless like they said. Maybe I should just give up, walk away, let them win, and try to rebuild my life somewhere far away where I could forget all of this. I was seriously considering quitting my job and moving across the country when my phone rang. It was Nora Whitfield, the senior marketing VP at my company. She was 52, had been with the firm for 20 years, and had a reputation for being both brilliant and intimidating. I'd worked with her on several projects but didn't know her well personally. Why she was calling me at 3 a.m. was a mystery. Cassidy, her voice came through clear and alert. I saw your office light was on. I'm in the parking garage. Come downstairs. We're getting coffee. It wasn't a question. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Nora in a 24-hour diner, both of us nursing black coffee. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, then said something that changed everything. I escaped a toxic family 20 years ago. I recognize the signs, and I recognize what you're going through. You think you're alone, that you're crazy, that maybe you're the problem. You're not. I stared at her, speechless. Nora told me her story, a eerily similar tale of favoritism, manipulation, and eventual betrayal. She'd been the responsible child, the one who succeeded, while her brother was coddled and enabled. When Shed finally set boundaries, her family had turned on her viciously. Shed moved across the country, changed her phone number, and rebuilt her life from nothing. The first 2 years were brutal, she said. But 20 years later, Shed never regretted it. The people who should love you unconditionally are causing you the most harm. That tells you everything you need to know. Nora became my mentor in ways that went beyond professional development. She introduced me to her circle of friends, women who'd also escaped toxic families and built chosen families from scratch. Suddenly, I had invitations to dinner parties and book clubs, people who wanted to spend time with me, not because of obligation, but because they genuinely enjoyed my company. The isolation began to crack. 2 days later, I received a LinkedIn message from someone named Lauren Hastings. The name wasn't familiar. Her message was brief. I dated Derek 3 years ago. I think we need to talk. We met at a coffee shop near my office, and Lauren turned out to be a 30-year-old lawyer with sharp eyes and direct manner. She explained that she'd seen Mallory's Instagram video through a mutual friend and recognized Derek's car in the background of one shot. She'd dated him for 14 months. And toward the end of their relationship, there had been a woman had been suspiciously close to. Lauren had felt crazy for suspecting something, and Derek had gaslit her thoroughly. Now she realized the pattern. But more importantly, Lauren had information about Derek's gambling problem. She'd caught him stealing $200 from her purse to cover a bet. When confronted, had become verbally abusive. She'd broken up with him immediately. She'd also discovered he had connections to some unsavory characters, loan sharks who charged exorbitant interest. Derek wasn't just in debt, he was in danger. Lauren offered to testify if needed, to provide written statements, to do whatever would help my case. Her validation meant everything. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. Derek had a pattern, and I'd simply been his latest target. The third unexpected ally came from a source I never anticipated. Mrs. Margaret Chen, the elderly woman who'd lived next door to my parents for 20 years, contacted me through Facebook. She was 78 years old, widowed, and had watched me grow up. Her message was apologetic and urgent. Cassidy, I need to speak with you. I have information about your parents that you should know. We met at her small house, surrounded by photographs of her grandchildren and the scent of jasmine tea. Mrs. Chen looked uncomfortable, wringing her hands as she spoke. I should have said something years ago, she began. I witnessed conversations between your parents about you. I heard your mother tell Mallory multiple times that you were the investment child, the one who would pay off eventually. Your father referred to you as their retirement plan. They discussed waiting until you were established in your career before asking for money, making sure you felt obligated enough to say yes. Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with tears. I convinced myself it wasn't my business, that family matters should stay private. But when I heard what happened, how they sided with Mallory after what she did, I realized my silence made me complicit. I'm so sorry. She offered to provide a written statement if I needed it. More than that, she validated my reality. I wasn't imagining the differential treatment. It had been intentional, calculated, observed by others. The strategy had been discussed openly enough that neighbors heard it. Through my therapist's recommendation, I started attending a support group for adult children of narcissistic families. The group met Tuesday evenings in a community center, 10 people sitting in a circle sharing stories that could have been interchangeable. Everyone had a version of the golden child and scapegoat dynamic. Everyone had been exploited, manipulated, gaslit. Everyone had struggled with the decision to cut contact. The terminology I learned gave me framework for understanding. Scapegoat was the role it'd been assigned, blamed for family problems while Mallory enjoyed the golden child position. Triangulation described how my parents had pitted us against each other. Gaslighting explained why I'd doubted my own perceptions for so long. Flying monkeys were the extended family members who attacked on my parents' behalf. Having names for these patterns was powerful. I wasn't experiencing something unique to my dysfunction. This was a recognizable pattern of abuse documented and studied. Other people had survived it. I could too. During one particularly impactful therapy session, my therapist asked a simple question that reframed everything. If a stranger treated you the way your family treats you, would you tolerate it? The answer was immediate and obvious. No, never. I wouldn't accept this behavior from a coworker, a friend, an acquaintance, anyone. So why was I accepting it from family? Because they're family, I said weakly, and my therapist leaned forward. Family isn't who shares your blood, she said. Family is who shows up with love, who supports you, who celebrates your successes, who respects your boundaries. Your parents and sister have never been family in any way that matters. You're not losing family by cutting them off. You're freeing yourself from people who never valued you. The clarity was blinding. I'd been trying to maintain relationships with people who'd never truly been family to me. I'd been grieving a loss that had happened years ago, maybe my entire life. My decision solidified in that moment. There would be no reconciliation, no forgiveness, no going back. Only protection, boundaries, and the slow building of a real family. One I'd choose for myself. The private investigator, Rita, called me with her final report after 3 months of comprehensive investigation. What she'd uncovered was worse than I'd imagined, but also gave me complete ammunition. Derek's gambling debts totaled $120,000, not the $80,000 the text messages had mentioned. He owed money to 3 different loan sharks, each charging interest rates that compounded weekly. The people he owed were not patient creditors. Rita had documentation of threats, evidence that Derek had been given deadlines with serious consequences if he didn't pay. His plan to marry me had been born of desperation, not just greed. Mallory's financial situation was equally dire. Her credit card debt was spread across 11 cards, all maxed out, totaling closer to $65,000. She'd been living a completely false life, posting photos of luxury while drowning in bills. My parents' situation was perhaps most shocking. They'd taken out a second mortgage on their house 2 years ago, borrowing $150,000. The money had gone primarily to funding Mallory's lifestyle, paying for her apartment, her car, her shopping habits, her constant needs. They were 6 months behind on payments, and foreclosure proceedings had already begun. The entire family was a house of cards held together by lies and maintained by my unwitting subsidization. Rita provided bank statements, loan documents, collection notices, all legally obtained through public records and strategic information gathering. The evidence was irrefutable and comprehensive. I consulted with Ellen about what to do with this information. Simply possessing it wasn't enough. The attacks were continuing, and I needed to shift from defensive to offensive. Ellen and I spent hours crafting a careful strategy. Everything had to be factual, verifiable, and presented in a way that couldn't be construed as libel or defamation. I created a blog, simple and clean, titled The Truth About Family Betrayal. I didn't use their names initially, referring to them as my parents, my sister, my former fiancé. But I included the timeline of events, screenshots of messages with identifying information redacted, summaries of financial exploitation, and copies of legal documents. I published it on a Saturday morning, then shared the link on my personal social media with a brief note. This is my truth. I'm sharing it because I'm tired of being silent while others control the narrative. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 24 hours, the post had 30,000 views. Comments flooded in from people sharing their own stories of family betrayal, thanking me for speaking out, offering support. But more significantly, people in our local community who knew my family started recognizing the details. The dots connected quickly. A local lifestyle blogger named Simone reached out, asking if she could feature my story in her online magazine. She wanted to write about toxic family dynamics and the courage it takes to set boundaries. I agreed to an interview on the condition that it remain anonymous with my face hidden. The article was published in a regional online magazine with significant readership in Connecticut and Massachusetts. The headline was, "When Family Becomes Toxic: One Woman's Journey from Exploitation to Freedom." The article detailed my story without naming names, but with enough specific details that anyone who knew my family would recognize them. The piece went viral within our regional community, shared thousands of times. Derek's firm saw the article, and though names were redacted, enough details matched that internal discussions began. His behavior had already put him on probation. This public attention, even tangentially connected to him, was the final straw. Derek was terminated to protect the firm's reputation. Mallory's few remaining social media sponsors dropped her immediately, not wanting any association with controversy. Her follower count plummeted as people reassessed her carefully curated image against new information. My parents' house of cards collapsed spectacularly. Without my monthly $1,000 contributions, without the country club fees it'd been paying, without any financial support and facing their own massive debts, they couldn't maintain their lifestyle. The country club membership lapsed completely, and they received letters disinviting them from club events due to unpaid dues. Their social standing, which they'd carefully cultivated for decades, evaporated. Friends who'd been part of their club circle distanced themselves. My father's business partners started asking questions about his judgment and financial stability. My mother's book club, several members of which had reached out to me privately with support, ostracized her. The gossip network they'd relied on turned against them as details emerged. The foreclosure proceedings on their house advanced. They received notices, deadlines, final warnings. They tried to sell the house to avoid foreclosure, but between the underwater mortgage and the rushed timeline, they couldn't get offers high enough to cover what they owed. My parents were facing the loss of the home they'd lived in for 35 years, and for the first time, they had no one to bail them out. Mallory's unraveling was swift and complete. Derek, who'd been her supposed true love, dumped her via text message the moment his financial situation became unsalvageable. The message was cold and calculated. "You're as broke as your sister now, what's the point?" Mallory, who'd destroyed my engagement, believing Derek truly loved her, realized she'd been used just as I had been. She called me 17 times in one day, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. I didn't answer. She was evicted from her luxury apartment and, with nowhere else to go, moved into my parents' basement. The irony was not lost on me. The golden child who'd been given everything was now trapped in a failing house with parents who were facing financial ruin because of choices they'd made for her benefit. Mallory had no job skills, no savings, no prospects. Her social media influencer career was destroyed, her reputation in tatters. Former friends avoided her, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. She tried to rebuild her online presence, but every new post was met with comments referencing the betrayal. Her follower count continued to drop. Then came the moment that almost broke me despite my resolve. My father showed up at my apartment building again, violating the restraining order. Security called the police, but before they arrived, he stood under my window shouting, "You're really going to let your parents lose their home? You're going to watch us end up on the street? We're your family, Cassidy. You owe us. Blood is supposed to mean something." I watched from my window, phone in hand with the police on the line, and felt nothing but cold certainty. When the police arrived and escorted him away, he was charged with violating the restraining order. My parents received a letter from my lawyer informing them that any further contact would result in additional legal action. My mother sent one final attempt, a handwritten letter delivered through their attorney to avoid direct contact. The letter was manipulative to its core, not an actual apology but a guilt trip. "We may have made some mistakes, but family forgives. Are you really going to abandon us in our time of need? After everything we've done for you? Family should help each other. That's what love is." I read it once, then filed it with all the other evidence. There would be no rescue, no reconciliation, no caving to guilt. They'd made their choices. These were the consequences. For the first time in my life, I was allowing them to experience the natural results of their actions without swooping in to save them. I threw myself into work with renewed energy once the immediate crisis phase passed. My focus sharpened, no longer diluted by family drama or emotional manipulation. A major campaign I'd been managing for our largest client exceeded all projections, bringing in 40% more revenue than anticipated. The success led to my promotion to Vice President of Marketing, a position I'd been working toward for 3 years. My salary increased to $175,000 annually, and with it came stock options and a significant performance bonus. More importantly, the company was expanding, opening offices in multiple cities. I could relocate anywhere. I chose Seattle, drawn by the idea of 3,000 miles between me and everyone who'd hurt me. A fresh start in a city where no one knew my history, where I could be just Cassidy, not the forgotten daughter or the exploited sister. The move was approved immediately, and I began planning my new life. Nora and her circle of friends became my real family in ways blood relatives had never been. We gathered for weekly dinners, rotating between apartments, cooking together and talking for hours. There were no competitions, no favoritism, no hidden agendas. When someone succeeded, we celebrated genuinely. When someone struggled, we showed up with support. Nora's son, Garrett, started attending these dinners occasionally. He was 32, recently divorced, with joint custody of his 6-year-old daughter Lily. He was kind in a quiet, genuine way that felt safe. We started as friends, talking about books and hiking trails, sharing stories about our weeks. He had a healthy relationship with his parents, spoke about them with warmth and respect, and I watched how they interacted with wonder. This was what normal looked like. Parents who asked questions and listened to answers. Parents who respected boundaries. Parents who celebrated their son's happiness rather than competing with it. After 6 months of friendship, Garrett asked if I'd like to have dinner with him alone, an actual date. I said yes, feeling cautiously hopeful. We took things slowly, both of us careful from past hurts. There was no rush, no pressure, just authentic connection building naturally. Meanwhile, the legal victory I'd been working toward came through. Ellen had filed a lawsuit against Derek for identity theft and fraud. During our engagement, Derek had forged my signature on a credit application, using my information and credit score to secure a loan he'd never intended to repay. I'd discovered this during Rita's investigation, buried in credit report discrepancies. The evidence was clear. My signature had been forged. The loan taken out while we were engaged, but before any legal financial connection existed, used entirely for Derek's gambling debts. Criminal charges were filed. Derek, facing potential jail time and unable to afford a decent defense after losing his job, pleaded guilty to avoid incarceration. The judge ordered restitution of $50,000 to be paid over 5 years through wage garnishment. Derek's professional architecture license was suspended indefinitely, pending ethics review. His career was destroyed, his reputation ruined permanently. He'd never practice architecture again in any serious capacity. I worked with Ellen to publish warnings in professional networks about Derek's pattern of financial manipulation. We documented his history carefully, always staying within legal bounds, never making claims we couldn't prove. Several other women came forward with similar stories after seeing the warnings. One woman, Melissa, had been engaged to Derek 5 years ago. He'd convinced her to co-sign a loan for his supposed business expansion, then disappeared when payments came due, leaving her with $30,000 in debt. Another woman, Patricia, had dated him briefly and caught him stealing jewelry from her apartment. A third had noticed money missing from her purse during their relationship. The pattern was undeniable and well documented. Discussion of a class action lawsuit began, coordinated by Ellen. Derek would spend years, possibly decades, paying for what he'd done. More importantly, his pattern was now public record. He couldn't harm others the same way. Mallory's downfall reached completion in the most fitting way possible. Desperate and still unable to accept responsibility, she made a final catastrophic mistake. She stole my mother's jewelry, pieces that had been in the family for generations, and pawned them for $3,000. My mother, who'd defended Mallory through everything, finally saw her clearly when she became the victim. My parents kicked Mallory out of their house, cutting her off financially for the first time in her life. Mallory, homeless and broke with burned bridges everywhere, called me from a number I didn't recognize. Her voice was small and defeated. "Cassidy, please. I'll do anything. Just help me. I'll change. I'll get therapy. I'll pay you back somehow. Just don't leave me like this. I'm your sister." I felt nothing, just calm clarity. "You made your choices, Mallory. I made mine. We're done." I hung up and blocked the number immediately, setting the final boundary. There would be no rescue, no softening, no going back. My parents' reckoning came in stages. They lost the house to foreclosure, forced to pack up 35 years of memories and move to a small rental apartment in a rough neighborhood. The contrast to their former lifestyle was stark and deliberate. My father's health declined from stress, high blood pressure, and heart palpitations, landing him in the hospital twice. My mother's entire social circle dissolved, former friends avoiding her calls and invitations. Both of them finally seemed to understand that they'd destroyed their family through their own choices, prioritizing the golden child who'd never actually cared about them beyond what they could provide. They sent one final letter through an attorney, their last attempt at contact. This letter was different from previous manipulations. It took actual responsibility. We see now what we did. We understand that we lost our daughter through our own actions, through years of favoritism and exploitation. We treated you like a resource instead of a child. We're sorry. We know it's too late, and we don't expect forgiveness. We just wanted you to know that we finally understand. I read the letter sitting in my new apartment in Seattle, 3,000 miles away from them. I felt a small sadness, grief for what could have been if they'd been different people. But I felt no urge to respond, no need for closure or reconciliation. Some apologies come too late. Some damage can't be repaired. I filed the letter away and continued building my new life. Extended family members who'd cut me off started reaching out as the full truth became clear. Cousins who'd believed my parents' version of events sent apologetic messages. My cousin Emma, who'd uninvited me from her wedding, called crying and asking for forgiveness. She'd been manipulated, fed lies, and felt terrible. I considered each relationship individually. Emma, who'd genuinely been misled and showed real remorse, I cautiously reconnected with. Others who'd made no effort to verify facts before choosing sides, I left blocked. True character shows in crisis, and they'd shown me who they were. My Aunt Margaret, my father's sister, sent a long email explaining she'd been afraid to go against my parents, that family pressure had been intense, but she should have reached out to me privately. I appreciated her honesty and agreed to occasional phone calls, rebuilding trust slowly. Most extended family relationships stayed severed. They'd made their choices without asking for my side. I owed them nothing. 1 year after walking out of my parents' house with that portfolio of evidence, I stood on the balcony of my Seattle apartment watching the city lights twinkle in the evening darkness. Garrett was inside making dinner, and I could hear him talking to Lily on speakerphone about her day at school. My career was thriving beyond anything I'd imagined. The Seattle office expansion was succeeding, and I'd been instrumental in its growth. I was sleeping through the night, eating regular meals, exercising 3 times weekly. My body had healed, returning to healthy weight with color back in my face. My therapist and I had graduated from weekly sessions to monthly check-ins, equipped with tools to maintain my mental health independently. The transformation was visible in photographs. I looked at pictures from a year ago and barely recognized the exhausted, hollow-eyed woman staring back. Now I saw someone peaceful, confident, genuinely happy. The first Thanksgiving in Seattle changed everything. Nora insisted I join her family's celebration, refusing to accept my polite demurral. I arrived at her sister's house to find 30 people gathered, a chaotic blend of biological family and chosen family, all welcomed equally. The warmth was overwhelming. People asked about my work, my move to Seattle, my interests, and actually listened to my answers. There was laughter without cruelty, teasing without malice. During dinner, Garrett stood with Lily beside him, both of them grinning. He gave a short speech about being grateful for second chances and new beginnings, then knelt down beside my chair. Lily, bouncing with excitement, held out a small box. "Cassidy," Garrett said, his voice steady and sure, "you've shown me what real strength looks like. You've shown Lily what it means to choose happiness and health over obligation. Will you marry us?" The ring was simple and beautiful, exactly my style. I said yes through tears while the room erupted in cheers. Lily threw herself at me, hugging me tight, and I held her, feeling overwhelmed by love I'd never expected to receive. This was family, real family, chosen and cherished. I'd started writing publicly about recovering from family trauma, my blog growing to include thousands of followers with similar stories. The comments section became a support community where people shared experiences and encouraged each other. I was invited to speak at therapy conferences about setting boundaries with toxic families, becoming an advocate for adult children who'd cut off abusive parents. My article in Psychology Today about the decision to go no contact was shared widely, validating countless people who'd felt guilty for protecting themselves. It turned my pain into purpose, helping others navigate the same impossible choices I'd faced. The work was fulfilling in ways my marketing career, as successful as it was, could never be. In therapy, I continued processing layers of grief. I wasn't grieving my actual parents and sister. My therapist helped me understand. I was grieving the family I'd never had, mourning idealized parents who'd never existed, saying goodbye to the hope that they might change. The grief was complex and non-linear. Some days I felt completely healed. Other days, something small would trigger old wounds. A daughter laughing with her mother in a store, a father hugging his child, moments of casual affection I'd never experienced. I learned that healing isn't linear, that some scars remain forever, that being healed doesn't mean being unbothered. It means having tools to process pain when it arises, means knowing the scars prove survival rather than weakness. A chance encounter in Seattle nearly derailed my progress. I was in a grocery store, exhausted after a long workday, when I saw a woman who looked exactly like Mallory. Same hair color, same build, same way of moving. My heart rate spiked, panic flooding my system. I abandoned my shopping cart and left the store, sitting in my car, breathing through the anxiety. But then something shifted. A year ago, this would have spiraled me into days of fear and rumination. Now, after several minutes of deep breathing and grounding exercises, the panic passed. I went back into the store, finished my shopping, and continued my evening unchanged. Growth was measurable in these small moments, in my ability to experience a trigger and recover quickly, in my certainty that I was safe even when anxiety said otherwise. Final contact from my past came on a random Tuesday evening. My mother had somehow obtained my new phone number, probably through hiring someone to find it. A text message appeared. "Your father had another heart attack, has in the hospital, has asking for you. Please come." I stared at the message for a long time, examining my emotional response. What I felt was nothing. No guilt, no obligation, no pull to rush to his bedside. Just calm emptiness. I responded simply, "I hope he recovers, but am not coming." Then I blocked the new number and made a note to change my phone number again. In my therapy session that week, I discussed the incident. My therapist asked how I felt about my decision. I felt good, I realized. Protected, healthy. Choosing not to go wasn't cruelty. It was self-preservation. My father had never shown up for me in any meaningful way my entire life. I owed him nothing, not even a hospital visit. Garrett and I planned our wedding, a small ceremony for 40 people who genuinely loved and supported us. Nora would walk me down the aisle, having earned that honor more than my father ever had. Garrett's parents welcomed me warmly into their family, treating me with the casual affection they showed their own children. Lily was thrilled to be flower girl, practicing her walk daily. There was no drama, no manipulation, no hidden agendas, just love, simple and real and uncomplicated. I found myself looking forward to the wedding with pure excitement rather than anxiety. This was what healthy looked like. One evening, I recorded a video diary, processing the entire journey. I needed to articulate what I'd learned, both for myself and for others following similar paths. I spoke directly to the camera, my voice steady. For years, I thought something was wrong with me. I believed if I just tried harder, achieved more, needed less, maybe they'd love me the way they loved Mallory. I was wrong. I wasn't unlovable. I was in an unloving environment. Blood relatives aren't guaranteed to be family. Real family shows up, supports you, celebrates your successes, respects your boundaries. My parents and sister were never family in any way that matters. Walking away from toxicity isn't failure. It's courage. You can't heal in the environment that made you sick. If your family treats you like a burden, trust your instincts. If they exploit your success while diminishing your worth, believe your eyes. Document everything because broken trust requires evidence for healing. Cut financial entanglement with toxic people. It's always a trap. Grief for living people is valid, complicated, and real. Build chosen families slowly and carefully. Therapy isn't weakness, it's investing in your future. You deserved better then, and you deserve better now. The final lesson crystallized one Saturday morning. I sat on my balcony with coffee, Garrett beside me reading the newspaper, the sounds of the city humming below. I realized I hadn't just survived. I'd won. Not by destroying them, though they'd certainly destroyed themselves through their own choices. I'd won by building a life they'd said I didn't deserve. I'd won by becoming a person they'd claimed I couldn't be. I'd won by finding love they'd insisted I'd never have. My spoiled sister had been the star of our family her entire life. She'd gotten private schools, luxury trips, designer clothes, unconditional love, endless chances. And I'd gotten something infinitely better. I'd gotten free. Free from the need for their approval. Free from the cycle of disappointment and hope. Free from constantly proving my worth to people who'd decided long ago I had none. Free to build my life on my terms with people who chose me as I chose them. Mallory had everything and ended up with nothing. I'd been given nothing and built everything that mattered. The best revenge isn't destruction, I realized. The best revenge is building a beautiful life they'll never be part of. It's knowing you survived them and thrived without them. It's finally, completely, choosing yourself over their dysfunction. I don't know where Mallory is now, and I don't care to know. My parents are strangers who share my DNA, nothing more. But I know where I am. I'm home, surrounded by people who chose me as I chose them, planning a wedding to a man who sees my worth, living in a city where no one knows my painful history, writing a new story, one where I'm not the supporting character or the scapegoat or the resource to exploit. This time, I'm the star of my own life. And that's the only spotlight I ever needed. Have you ever had to cut off toxic family members to protect yourself? Drop a comment below and share your story. You're not alone in this struggle. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss our next story. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to choose yourself over family obligation. Thank you for watching and for being part of this community where we talk about real issues without judgment. Remember, your healing matters, your boundaries are valid, and you deserve relationships built on genuine love and respect. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.